2 weeks. That was how long I had been the school nobody before she walked into the cafeteria and made me visible. I say it like it was a single moment, because for me, it was. A bookmark in a book that had been blank for months. I want to hear from you. If this ever happened to you, type a short line in the comments now. Each reply helps me tell the next part truer. It was a rainy Thursday, midterms week, when everything that felt invisible about me stacked into a single instant. I carried a tray of food, the metal rattling under my fingers, and froze because the long table where my classmates sat slid like a collective will away from me. Jessica and Tyler were laughing, Laura was scrolling her phone, Derek looked down. Nobody met my eyes. The hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder than ever. I asked, "Hey, can I sit?" And the room answered with the kind of silence that was deliberate, like a recorded track someone pressed mute on. I thought I had misread the room until Emma stood up and walked over. Here is the thing I learned that day. Invisibility can be assigned, but it can also be refused. I am going to tell you how a single choice by one person broke a pattern that had been engineered around me, and how that choice led me back to myself. My backstory is short and uneven. I grew up in a small suburb where my father worked nights and my mother taught middle school science. When I was 12, I discovered an old point-and-shoot camera in the attic, wrapped in a paper bag with my grandfather's name scribbled on it. Photographing became a private language, a place where I could point and say what I could not speak. At 15, I won a small contest, and a local coffee shop displayed 3 prints in a crooked line. For a year, I felt like the world acknowledged me by proxy through those pictures. But then high school happened. The classroom politics, the tiered seating in the cafeteria, the way popularity gathered like mold in corners. People I thought were friends found it easier to laugh at me than with me. Small betrayals piled up, group chats that omitted me, project roles given to others, a poster with my name misspelled. Each omission felt like an edit to my existence. I learned to make myself smaller to avoid being noticed in the wrong way. By the time I reached junior year, I had developed habits to survive the invisibility. I sat toward the back of class, kept my head down, and smoothed the edges on everything I said so it would not be worth responding to. Mr. Hayes, my art teacher, noticed the tension in my shoulder and asked once after class why I did not apply for the regional show. "Because I am not what they want," I said, and he laughed softly, then said, "You are what you have been denying." That sentence lodged in my chest. It was around then that I started bringing my camera to school again, not to be seen, but to remember what surfaces looked like under honest light. The smell of old books in the library, the chalk dust on Miss Alvarez's desk, the metallic taste of pennies saved in a jar for a bus fare to the gallery downtown. Those textures were mine. The routine of being ignored was not dramatic, it was micro-tactics. Jessica would tell a joke and stop mid-smile when I walked past, as if I were invisible air leaking from the conversation. Tyler would call me Shadow Boy in a tone that made people look up and laugh, and the laughter would always be faster than my answering remark. Laura, who used to sit with me in middle school, began to reply to my messages with single words and lots of emojis. Then there were the deliberate edits, a group selfie in which I was cropped out, a prom committee list with my name never appearing, a project where my contribution was described by someone else. Each micro-dismissal taught me to keep small, to shrink into a corner of my own life and make less noise. I remember the cold of the metal locker against my palm, the sting of breath in the hallway, the echo of my footsteps like a rehearsal of absence. It did not feel like cruelty at first. It felt like a rule I had to learn. I began to test boundaries in tiny ways. I posted a photograph of the old theater marquee lit up at night and tagged Mr. Hayes more than once. I sent a short message to Derek. "You coming to the show?" He replied, "If I can get out of Coach Ben's drill, yeah." Small confirmations mattered. Then the escalation happened without proclamations. Someone started forwarding embarrassing edits of me on social media with captions that made them into a running joke. A teacher's email got misdirected, and a critique I wrote for an assignment was circulated with a snide header. The taste of iron came back into my mouth when I read comments that took a private moment and made it public. I felt like a photograph left to fade in the sun. One afternoon, leaning against a radiator, I overheard Jessica saying to Tyler, "We should vote, make it official, see who is allowed into the table." They used the word vote like it was a club bylaw. That day, the cafeteria became a courtroom. I remember the tinny rattle of trays, the plastic smell of the air, the way sunlight sliced through the high windows, blurring faces into bright shapes. I stood there and watched them mark me down. And then Emma did something I did not see coming. She was quiet, always, a girl with a sketchbook that smudged graphite on her fingers. I had seen her in art class, but we had never spoken more than polite exchanges over charcoal. That Thursday, she stood up, walked across the room, and without asking, sat across from me. "You can sit here," she said. Her voice was low but steady. "This table seems messy with rules." People looked. Jessica's laugh cut, Tyler's jaws set. Laura glanced down at her phone, uncertain. Derek squeezed my shoulder like he was releasing air. The air tasted like wet paper and coffee and something that tasted like possibility. We had a conversation then that lasted longer than I can condense. There were at least 9 exchanges while everyone watched, and each felt like an argument with the atmosphere of the room. I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yes." I laughed, a small, surprised sound. She leaned forward and said, "I have been choosing people for a long time. I choose differently now." I asked, "Why me?" She said, "Because I saw you taking pictures of the rain last week, and you do not look for permission." I said, "That sounds like a reason." She said, "It is. Sit." Tyler said, "What is her problem?" Emma looked at him and said, "My problem is you." Laura said nothing. Derek said, "Good choice." The room breathed, shifted like an audience sensing a new act. The clink of trays resumed, softer this time, as if people were measuring where to place their own forks. That selection by her was the spark, but it also made the machinery that had kept me invisible work harder. Sudden visibility is a threat to the people who manage the scene. After Emma's choice, Jessica started whispering in corners, coordinating posts, making sure my name hung like an insult one more time. Tyler escalated from jokes to direct digs in class discussions, interrupting me with a timing that felt practiced. I discovered that invisibility had been curated. There were group chats where votes had been cast about who was allowed to eat at which table for the season. There were screenshots of private messages that had been shared without my knowledge. I found a video of a group editing me out of a memory, and that discovery felt like a physical thing in my hands. A moment of tension came when I opened a direct message thread that a classmate had accidentally left logged on a library computer. The chat had a plan, names listed with check marks, timing for a public humiliation during assembly. I could feel my heart hammering, the kind of quick, dry panic that tastes like metal. I debated whether to tell a teacher, to show the screenshots, to be the kid who raised an alarm. If I showed the messages, would I be labeled a tattletale? If I stayed silent, would I be complicit in my own erasure? I remembered Mr. Hayes telling me that evidence is a kind of light. I took screenshots, saved the files, and sat with the weight of them on my phone as if they were stones. The choice felt like standing on the edge of a platform and deciding to either step back into the crowd or step forward into a cold wind. I chose the cold wind. I went to Miss Alvarez, the counselor, and said, "I found something." We sat in a room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. The window rattled with a thin rain. She listened, not with the quick breath of someone who wanted to decide immediately, but with a patience that felt like a slower clock. "Show me," she said. I showed the threads. We planned how to present it, how to protect myself against retaliations, how to keep a record. Miss Alvarez told me that formal complaints had a process and that the school would hold a mediation if enough evidence was presented. Her voice was calm and practical. "We will document, we will meet with Principal Davis, and we will ask for a neutral mediator." A reassurance like that can sound small, but it is architecture for safety. The planning took days that stretched like elastic. Derek became my unlikely logistics manager. "We need copies," he said, handing me a flash drive. "We need witnesses," Laura offered, surprising me with a steady gaze. Mr. Hayes wrote a short note about my contributions to class projects that I could include. Emma contacted a friend from the photography club, Jamie, who offered to give a short statement about seeing edits and exclusions online. Coach Ben agreed to monitor the hallway during passing periods. The group of helpers included at least 8 named people who did small, decisive actions: Derek, Laura, Mr. Hayes, Miss Alvarez, Jamie, Coach Ben, Principal Davis, and Emma. That list felt like armor. We rehearsed what I would say. We rehearsed staying calm in front of the room. The assembly where the issue came up was sharp with fluorescent light and the smell of disinfectant. I remember the high ceilings swallowing our voices. The mediator, a woman named Miss Patel from the district office, took a seat at the front. Jessica sat pale and deranged. Tyler looked like someone waiting for a verdict that would be interesting to hear. And parents dotted the gym like a constellation. I had at least 10 seconds of stomach-sick fear before I spoke. "I brought evidence," I said. I felt someone hand me paper. Mr. Hayes, quiet as a margin. Miss Patel asked questions. Jessica defended herself with a version of events polished for performance. Tyler joked, and the room laughed, a reflex that stung. Derek and Laura answered with simple facts when asked what they had seen. Jamie handed over a file. The mediator read the screenshots out loud, and the names on the chat were clear. At the end of the hearing, there was not a single definitive punishment. The school opted for a mediated agreement. The terms were practical: removal of offensive posts, restorative sessions for Jessica and Tyler to attend restorative sessions, and a clause that allowed for monitored social media behavior for a time. It was not dramatic. It was legalese adapted for a school environment, a sort of community contract. I felt oddly relieved and still hollow. The visible result did not fix the nights I had already spent feeling small, but it did change something in the room. People who had been complicit shifted their posture. There was a sound like a page turning in a book. The action that felt like the real exit for me was not the mediation. It was simpler and intimate. One Monday evening, I packed a small box of prints and left a note on my locker that said, "I am making space for better things." I wrote it in a shaky pen, folded the note, and slid it through the locker slats. Then I posted a set of photos on my profile that I had been afraid to share. Grainy black and whites of the theater marquee, a close-up of Emma's sketchbook corner, a storefront reflection that looked like 1,000 small windows. I closed the laptop and felt a weight like a hand lifting off my chest. The symbolic act of leaving the locker felt like stepping away from a stage set that had been written for me. I did not run away. I shifted the scene. That night, I got messages. "Wow," from Jamie. "Proud of you," from Mr. Hayes. A single heart from Emma. The phone buzzed with the soft sound of contact. After I made the move public, there were attempts to pull me back. Tyler left anonymous comments on older posts, and a rumor spun that I had staged the whole thing for attention. There were long, cold stretches where I expected a knock at the door of my new life, with a demand to explain why I had left the old one. I found moments of peace in small sensory things: the smell of wet asphalt on the walk home, the smooth pull of shutter against my finger, the warm press of a coffee cup lid while I edited images. Those little textures became proof I was alive in ways that had nothing to do with other people's permission. A second moment of tension came 3 weeks later when someone leaked a private photo I had taken of Jessica from a distance, a misstep I had made trying to document the culture rather than the exact acts. The photo circulated with an angry caption, and my name was attached. I received messages that were sharp and cruel. The panic felt different this time. It was not the surprise of discovery, but the old ache of being reduced to a single frame. I had to decide whether to apologize for showing something that might have inflamed the situation, or to stand behind the truth that context matters. I remember sitting under a streetlight, the smell of hot pretzel carts, my phone screen a glare that hurt. Emma texted, "Stay where you are, I am coming." When she arrived, she did not say anything grand. She put her hand on the back of my neck, steady and warm, and said, "You are not your worst picture." That sentence felt like a rope lowered into a well. I kept quiet and let it pull me up. Therapeutically and practically, I sought counsel beyond the school. My parents came to a meeting and listened. Mr. Hayes connected me with a community gallery curator, Lauren Mitchell, who offered to include 3 of my prints in a group show. That opportunity shifted my identity from someone defined by a table at lunch to an artist whose work had a place. The gallery work and the support of named allies gave me leverage. I started to block accounts that trafficked in cruelty, to document comments, to keep files with timestamps. The logistics matter when you are dealing with reputational harm. The immediate aftermath was a strange quiet. Jessica and Tyler kept their shoulders high in class, but their commentary lost its easy pitch. The followers on my profile were a slow accretion, not overnight. Derek joked in the hallway as if to reset old rhythms. Laura asked to borrow a print for her dorm room. Miss Alvarez checked in periodically with a note that smelled faintly of lemon and a line that said, "You did a brave thing." I slept better and still had days where an old reflex made me make myself small before speaking. We eventually entered a school-facilitated mediation that resembled a compact legal proceeding, with terms and a timeline. Principal Davis read the agreement into the record. Jessica apologized with qualifiers, and Tyler made a short statement about not understanding how far jokes go. The mediator recommended restorative sessions and a public apology at an assembly with a commitment to change. The agreement included counseling resources, a ban on doxing or reposting private images, and a clause for reevaluation after 6 weeks. Legally, it was not a subpoena. Emotionally, it was a correction. I am not naive. I know agreements can be paper thin if not upheld, but the structure gave me a sense of closure I had not anticipated. 1 month later, things had a new texture. I had 3 prints in a community week show arranged by Lauren that hung near a mural painted by local students. The lights in the gallery smelled like varnish and hot bulbs. People I did not know walked slowly, reading captions. Emma stood near the doorway with a scarf that smelled like cinnamon. I noticed small things. A barista at the coffee shop who had never said more than hello pointed at my framed print and said, "This one spoke to me." I had 8 new followers who seemed to be curators or students from other schools, wanting to know the story behind the shot. Derek and Laura came one opening night and stood, awkward and proud. The experience reshaped the narrative around me from an object of ridicule to a person with work and a voice. 3 months later, the picture was more complex. The school climate had shifted enough that a student group petitioned for a week focused on digital kindness. I led a small panel with Miss Alvarez and Jamie where we talked about documentation, consent, and the power dynamics of social media. That panel included a testimony from Lauren Mitchell about how representation affects opportunities. I saw Jessica in the room. She sat at the back, looking smaller than before. She did not approach me afterward. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I had wanted accountability more than vengeance. My print sales were modest. 3 orders for prints sent to people across the state, and 1 small commission from a local coffee shop for a mural idea. Money was not the point, but it meant I could afford to buy more film and a lens I had been craving. 6 months on the map of time, things settled in ways I could point to. I had a steady stream of people messaging about a small zine I put together. Lauren asked me to curate a teen corner in a neighborhood show. My followers had multiplied into a community of about 700 people who engaged in comments beyond a quick emoji. I began doing weekly walks with Emma, weekend afternoons where we would be quiet and sketch or photograph together. I had started attending sessions with a therapist who helped me unlearn the reflex to shrink. Derek and Laura re-established a normalcy in our friendship that felt more honest. Jessica had completed a restorative program and, through a mediated step, apologized publicly in a short statement that acknowledged harm. That did not erase the past, but it did rearrange what the future could be. I learned to think of freedom as the ability to show up fully without waiting for permission. If I have learned anything from being the school nobody and from Emma choosing me, it is this. Invisibility can be engineered, but so can visibility. You can accept what they offer you, or you can choose the terms of your presence. An emblematic line that keeps returning to me is small and blunt. Being chosen did not save me, choosing myself did. The gallery lights did not make me whole, the work I did between frames did. If this story resonates, if you have been made small by someone else, write in the comments 2 words, I was or I chose. Your line matters. And if you want more stories of people who turned silences into evidence, join this channel. We tell stories with documents, with faces, and with the slow rebuilding that follows. If you stayed with this until the end, thank you. She made me visible for a moment, and I made myself visible forever. To see the prints, the show is linked below. If you want to hear more about the mediation process, I will talk through the documents and the exact steps we took in the next video. Subscribe for more stories where being unseen is not the final line.